Hey everyone, Joe Carroll here. Excited to be spending some time with you guys mixing drums. It's just one of those things that never gets old. It's probably the most common request. That and vocals seems to be the most common request. Recently, I did a video on Produce Like a Pro channel, maybe a couple months back, that detailed a lot of my effects for drums. So we won't spend a lot of time on that, but what I thought we would do is we'll kind of look at my template, like where I start from on drums. And for our example today, I've got a drum set. You'll see a lot of plugins, but they're inactive. They're not doing anything. And I've got this kind of singer-songwriter pop kind of thing. I wanted to do something that was in the middle ground. I didn't want to do something too heavy, too hard, where we're trying to make the drums massive and smack somebody in the face. Or really dark and round singer-songwriter Americana. I wanted to kind of go somewhere in the middle, which hopefully fits a lot of you as far as something that you would maybe want to copy or steal some of these settings and that kind of thing. So here's the song that we have going in a very raw form. Okay, so the drums are very unimpressive to this point. They are very raw. And that's another reason that I started this song. It's not done in a glamorous room using a lot of excessively glamorous gear. So it's going to be starting from a spot that's not, sometimes I've done videos in the past where they're like the starting spot on those drums is is like too high. It's not representative of what we get to work on in a lot of smaller home-based studios and things like that. So let's just dive in. So the drums, based on what I'm hearing, I'm getting a really idea of already where I want to go with it. So you'll see in the top row a bunch of these auto align tools from Sound Radix. And what I do, that comes in as part of my template on the first row. I don't always use it though, because I'm only using it if it's a problem. I'm not, my way of mixing, the way I think, is I'm not trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Some people I think get too caught in the weeds before the weeds have even grown. So on a song like this, I can hear these raw drums. I don't hear any problems. I'm not hearing anything that is simple, maybe a flip of the phase switch or something like that, if necessary, won't fix. So I'm not needing any of that. So what I typically do is just go up here to no insert and just get rid of them. But sometimes I am mixing songs that was, they were recorded by people that aren't necessarily engineers by trade. They're doing it out of necessity for their own albums, and they're doing the best they can. But because of where microphones are positioned, that Sound Radix tool can be very handy. So that's tool number one, even though we will not be using it today. That said, you'll see I have a handful of things. My first row is now empty, so I can take tape saturation and put it up there if I want to. But when I hear this song with the track, I'm not necessarily hearing that I want it. However, if I want it, you'll see the first row of my 4 group masters for drums. I actually have 4 returns. A clean one right here, as you can see. A parallel squisher that is aux-based. I have a distortion track, as well as a fake room. I call it the roomizer. But I do have tape across the top here, the top row. So if I want to, I can just turn these on, and I'll turn it on all 4. And I may only use 1 or 2 or 3 of these 4 choices on any given mix, but they're there ready to go. And if I'm going to use it on one, just for sample reasons, so sample accuracy, phasing relationships, things like that, I'm just going to turn them on all 4 and just mix through them right from the beginning. Okay, so that said, let's just kind of go. I'm feeling punchy and modern, but not overly huge, not overly bombastic, and with a little bit of attack. I feel like there's room for definition in a track like this. So let's just start checking it out. Drums only. Okay, it It's not a bad kick. It's nothing special. So I have the SSL channel strip 2. And the reason that I use that on kick drums, kind of as a starting point, although I am very subject and likely to change it from time to time, is that it's just a full range audio. It's got great highs, it's got great lows, and everything in between. But I still get my channel strip and my noise gate, which are extremely effective, and the sound of that that SSL EQ that it's just part of me. It's part of who I am. So that's where I'm going to start. So let's check it out. That's pretty ugly, right around 420. Okay, let's add a little bottom end, and you'll see, even though I have no boost or cut, you'll see that a lot of my presets that I start from in my template already have certain things selected. If it's something that needs fast attack, most of the time it's already going to be selected. If the ratio may be selected, the frequency and the Q may already be kind of in the ballpark of where I'm going to be going, even though it's zeroed out, if that makes sense on the boost or cut. So let's check it out. Yeah, a little bottom end there. Now let's try some attack. Okay, I don't love the sound of the beater. I'm not sure what the material was or was not, if I had an impact pad, but I don't love it personally. So I'm not going to hype it very much because we do have a sample in here, and that may be our go-to guy for the attack. Let's just start there. Let's see what the channel strip gate will do. Okay, I think I may want just a little bit more than what that is offering. So what I can do, you'll see I have a row of things that are inactive. I see a distressor, I see a Kirchhoff EQ, I see this guy right here. That's doing a job on that kick drum. So I'm going to start with that on. Another great tool for you Pro Tools users, and then we'll just bypass this. The gate that's built in Pro Tools is really most all DAWs are pretty effective. Pretty good, but I'm going to go with the Sonox, the Oxford here, and we're going to just move on to the kick sample. Let's check it out. Okay, we're getting a lot of bottom end from that, so we may not need this bottom end boost that we had on the other drum. Let's cut out a little puffiness. Now let's see what the attack is like. I like that attack much better than the attack of what was captured on the day of the tracking. And you'll see most of my high pass filters are set to 30, and the low pass, it can be anywhere from 10 to 15, 20. That's not critical on a sample like this. There's no cymbal bleed or anything, so I'm going to leave it up fairly high. Let's put the two together. One thing to check, always make sure of, is that they are phase accurate. And we can see here that they are. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so let's remove that bottom end from the original drum. Now let's just kind of put it in with the entire drum kit, and let's kind of get a balance going between the sample and the kick, the real kick. I like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Now you'll see, I wanted to show you on the fifth little return master is whatever gets summed together on these 4 drum returns. Again, we talked about it: the clean, the parallel distortion, the parallel compression, the fake room if I need it. Those are all combining with the bass guitar on this one master here. And this is generally on from the beginning, but I didn't want it on from the beginning today because I wanted to show you what each one of them were. This is the X Saturator from Solid State Logic. I love what it does. Let's just do it before and after with the unprocessed drums, with really the only processing being the kick drum. Let's check it out. Significantly better right from the beginning. So I have that on from the get-go. And also you can see I have Carrell's True Iron here ready to go if I want a different type of a transformer sound. And that is going into one of about 4 different compressors that I am known to go to. Compressor number 1, it's almost all the time on pop and rock and stuff like that, is the VCA section of the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. And I prefer the red Class A version. And the only place you can get that is from Plug-in Alliance. I love them both. The green is awesome. If that's the one you have from UAD or whomever, absolutely go with it. But there's something about the tight bottom end of this Class A version that I just really, really love. And let me show you where my default kind of just the preset that I start from. And I may adjust the attack from 30 to 10. And I may also adjust the threshold a tiny bit, and that's about it. But I usually only want to hit this about a dB or 2. I'm going to be content. I mean, you can see how even just a half dB of registered compression is making the attacks and things more prominent. I just love the sound of this box. But because we're going to be adding samples and things are going to be getting louder, I'm going to be content to stop at a half dB for now. And I usually have this guy on from the beginning, and you'll see it's adding just a touch of top and just a touch of bottom, but it's the sound of this box. And I have went over these processors in other videos, so I don't want to spend too much time on them, but here we go. In fact, that bottom end, I may turn that down just a little bit more to 1 dB instead of 1.5 or 2. And then another thing that's built into my template I see is Carrell's True 5.2 here, kind of the Motown style EQ. Sometimes I'll go with that instead, but today we're just going to stick with the Lindell. And that is followed by a limiter, which I don't even have on at this point because it's just going to tickle the loudest parts here and there once I got everything set, once I have everything set. All right, so let's go back to the drums. I'm going to want just a little more attack. And I may add some air to that sample. Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a pretty cool sounding kick drum. Let's see what I have going on the snare. Okay, so what I may do, you'll see this top row is a bunch of inactive Neves. So I'm an NSSL guy, so that's built into my template as on all the time. But there's something about Neve circuits, the sound of that transformer on drums and the size enhancement, the little bit of harmonic distortion, and also a little bit of transient rounding that it can do depending on how hard you're hitting it. So let's just kind of check it out here. So that snare drum, it's fine. It's absolutely fine, but it's not impressive yet. So let's see if I add my default, you'll see the EQ is off, but I do have a little bit of mic built in, which is compensated for on the trim here. So let's do a before and after. Okay, so just a little extra enhancement. And I think what I'm going to do is I am going to add a little bit of that Neve air. Okay, that's not much, but I think it sounds better with it than it did without it. So now I'm going to come over to back to the SSL, and this time you'll see I have the Brainworks. And the reason is this THD knob. I love what it does on snare drums very often. So you'll see it's basically off at this point. As far as everything except THD, which I start at its default about halfway. So let me do that in real time and let you hear it. Hear that extra harmonic distortion that's being added. So sometimes in place of the Neve, I'll just use this. let's stick with the Neve because that was my first instinct, and use this about where it's set, and hear the combination of those two. Okay, fantastic. It definitely needs some snap and some air. I feel like that's where we're going to get a little bit of our snap, where the stick is striking the head. Now let's add a little bit of air. Okay, that's about all I'm going to do for right now, other than a little bit. You'll see the dynamic section of the SSL channel strips are amazing to me. A lot of times that is all I need for the snare drum, for the noise gate. Okay, before and after. Perfect. That's just enough cleanup work. I don't want to get rid of everything. I don't want, like the Oxford was doing on the bass drum, where it was getting rid of everything except just the bass drum. I don't want that out of a snare drum very often. There's sometimes a lot of grace notes and ghost notes, and it's just part of the glue of the kit is all that stuff being in there. All right, so let's go ahead while we're in solo here. And sometimes I work in solo a lot more than I do on others. Some days I don't work in solo very much at all. It really depends. But I think for today, because we're specifically talking about drums, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time in solo. So let's listen to the under mic, the bottom mic. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with the Neve with a little bit of saturation, not a lot. Anything I do the snare top, I pretty much always do the snare bottom, just to make sure there's no sample weirdness and phasing issues. But I like what the little bit of Neve air on the top. Okay, so now let's run over to the SSL. And let's add, I want to get a little bit of that white noise thing going. Okay, very good. Now we have to trim it a little bit. Now let's hear the two together and check the phase. Okay, so our bottom end is better, so it was recorded properly, which is great. I kind of like, okay, so sometimes I will use the channel strip gate to clean up some of that in-between stuff, but I feel like that's bringing out the ghost notes. It's bringing out part of the groove in between the hits. Check that out. It's snap to do, snap to do. So I think I'm going to leave that in there. I don't think I'm going to gate, I may not gate it at all. What I could attempt, though, is to play with the fast attack compressor. Let's see, 3-to-1, fastest release. Check it out. With and without. See, it smacks harder. Let's just check it in the mix. Okay, solid. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm always going to start bringing in the overheads. To me, that's, man, it is as important as the kick and the snare are. The overheads are a close number 2 to me because they just tie everything together. Let's listen to the overheads here. Okay, nothing special whatsoever. I mean, it's good, but it's you can tell it's a small, tight room. Nothing overly impressive. I feel like it could use some character. So I have a couple different character pieces that I can bring in. One of my go-tos is this guy right here. Let's check it out. The Loop Trotter. Okay, it is definitely pushing the attack of the snare drum back a little bit, which I absolutely like. Another go-to for me is this little radiator. Let's check him out. Okay, I like what that's doing. It's adding, listen to the sizzle around the edges. Okay, so we're gonna we're just gonna go with our gut, and we're gonna cover over the top of that loop trotter because we're gonna use a little radiator instead. So we're just gonna get rid of that. And let's go to the next step. And I don't really hear many other problems. You'll see I also have Pulsar 1178 in my session for compression options. And that's real new to me, so I'm still playing with that, but it's got some great saturation options. But man, I tell you what, a 4K E channel strip from SSL, whether it's Waves or SSL, Plugin Alliance, there's something not only about the sound of that EQ, but about the sound of that compressor on overheads that just makes my heart happy. All right, so let's kind of start dialing it in. See how it just gets more and more aggressive the more compression I dial in. Fast attack setting, about 3-to-1. Actually, let's go about 4-to-1 on this song. I'm going to start with the release as fast as it'll go, and depending on the tempo of the songs and how like busy the cymbal playing is, sometimes I'll slow it down to about a little over a second, to be real honest. Okay, let's start there. Now let's check about EQ. There's a little bit of a kind of a low mid thing. Right around there, 450, 460. Now let's see if we can bring up just a touch, top it. The thing is, you hear, we're wanting to EQ it with to make the snare drum sound great in there. But I also got to remember there's crash cymbals here and there. And I would not want to add any high end to that whatsoever. That is a lot. So right around 90 cycles on the high pass, and the low pass I'm going to keep off for now. And you see, I do like the sound of a 4000. That kind of that grit that they have. They have a character, and so I automatically start with a bit of that in there. Okay, let's put that in with the kick snare and see about the phase relationship and the volume. Okay, it's better. It was cut properly, so it's better just left alone. The snare drum has some bottom end, and the kick drum sounds a little tighter too, or a little bigger. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that hi-hat. Okay, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Nothing. Nothing, not really any problems to speak of. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to do the fast attack compression, about 3-to-1, 4-to-1, and fast release. And I'm just going to have that tickle that light on the backbeat of the snare. And the reason the fast attack kind of pushes the attack of the snare back into the hi-hat just a little bit, because you're always inherently going to have a little bit of bleed. Okay, let's get rid of just a little cloudiness. Right around 400 cycles. And I'm not going to add any high end to it yet at all until I hear it with the overhead. So there's so much high-end, high-frequency information in the overheads. The hi-hat just doesn't need any, unless it's sometimes in, really funky, really tight things, jazz. Not traditional jazz, but like more modern, aggressive, progressive jazz. Sometimes you're looking for a really bright, articulate hi-hat. That's not this song. It's played kind of a little bit loose, a little sloppier feel. But we are going to check the phase. There we go. So it was recorded properly, which is a good thing. All right, Okay, that sounds great. All right, so what we're gonna do, I'm really liking what we have so far. Is the drums are already cleaned up, the toms, because this is a record that I mixed, gosh, 6 years ago, maybe 8. I don't know. It's been a minute. Okay, same kind of thing. They're fine. They could use some help. They could use some help. All right, so let's make these a little larger than they currently are. So what I'm going to do is I have a couple different options for the Neve. On the tom-toms, I typically have the 4-band version from Kit. If I want the 3-band 1073 thing, I'll just drag and drop it over the top of this 4-band. But let's go ahead and start from here, and you'll hear that I do have some of that console preamplification, the preamp section built into it. Okay, let me see if I like the 1073 thing better. Pretty much the same, to be real honest. Let's just keep the 80 cycle filter that's built into it. Actually, because on a Neve, some of these old circuits, they actually cause a little bit of a bump at the frequency that you're cutting off. So when I'm using Neves, I usually kind of like to use that to my advantage on the snare drum. Yeah, sometimes even the kick drum, set it to 50 and get a boost at 50. Okay, so let's just go ahead and commit that to the floor tom and the rack tom. Now let's dial in some EQ. I feel like right around 500 to 600, there's some nasty stuff. So that's going to tighten up. That's going to tighten up. Now let's get a little attack. Enhance the stick hitting the head a little bit. Now add a little air on top of that. Now let's check adding some bottom end with the Neve 1073 going into it at 110. Okay. Now what it'll do is this will be before and after. Okay, substantially better. Let's see if that's enough bottom end. You'll see that in the channel strip, I was cutting everything off below around 80 cycles or so on the high pass. I'm not going to do any compression yet. Okay, so we are, remember, already benefiting from the sound of a little bit of transformer on the Neve. Let's just check out the EQ on the SSL. There's some of that basketball dribble frequency right there. Let's try adding a little attack. I feel like I definitely want some more bottom end here too. So let's take that Neve 110 and turn it up. I think we did that on this drum too, didn't we? Yes, we did. Okay, let's see how that combines in the overhead. See if they're in phase. Here's what it sounds like with the phase flipped. I almost feel like this one could maybe needs flipped. Let's turn that one off. I need to focus on just this drum. Make sure I got the overheads back the way they need to be with the snare. Yes, definitely better flip. Now let's check the floor tom. Focus in on just the floor tom. A little more bottom end with the flip. Okay, so the toms were cut. They weren't bad, but they're better opposite of the way they were recorded. So let's check the panning of the toms in the overheads. Okay, so yeah, somewhere right around here, because I'm going to do player's perspective, because this is one of those songs that I think the only people that are going to care about drum panning are the drummers that's playing along. Okay, check it out. going to cut back the high end just a little bit on the snare. Okay, so now let's start seeing what we have out of the room mics. Okay, so we have the typical problem, and it's not really a problem. I mean, it's part of the thing, it's part of the sound, really, is that the snare drum and the kick drum are seemingly appearing a little bit, snare drum appears more in the left and the kick drum appears more on the right. One thing that I have in my tool belt ready to go is Plugin Alliance has, in a lot of their plugins, has what you call mono maker built in. See here, in fact, I've already got it set to around 200 cycles. Check out, the compression itself isn't active, although I chose this, out of all their compressors that have this option built in, I chose the 77 in case I want to do the 1176 kind of thing. But check out what it does to the imaging of the rooms. Everything below 200 cycles is all of a sudden mono. It still sounds wide because the cymbals, the attack of various things the air is still spinning around the room. And that's what we want. That's where we're getting our stereo width. But we don't need the imbalance to be something that's making we don't want anything to take away from our center, from our foundation. So sometimes I'll go even higher. Let's just start with that. Now, instead of using that specific compressor as far as for the compression, my go-to to start is always going to be SSL channel strip, the 4KE, with a little bit of the preamp distortion built in. I'm not going to do any EQ. I'm just going to leave my presets right here where I'm chopping off a little bit of the top octave as well as the bottom couple octaves, because I don't really want any thunder from the kick drum. You know, it's just not what... There's nothing below 60 cycles, 70 cycles that I'm going to want out of a room. But that said, did you hear that one cymbal? Okay, perfect. So now you'll see why I have this other guy made. They're made inactive because I don't want to use that DSP if I'm not going to use that plugin. But you'll hear. Let's go to the left, and you'll see I've already got this little preset you hear on the right, the kick drum. That's making this kick drum even sound more centered. I'm taking that extra little bit at around 195 cycles. In fact, let's just play with it and find it. There we go. Now let's go to the left-hand side, and this is the SSL Dyne EQ. And the reason I'm using it is because it's kind of like FabFilter in a lot of ways. You can create points and drag them, and super narrow notches, super wide, lots of filter shapes. But also you can do mid-side, left and right only. It's a great tool. Okay, let's find that obnoxious cymbal. Woo, that is nasty. So now let's put that in dynamic mode. And the left-hand side only. Let's see. Let's do it. Let's do a little bit more. Turn the dynamic off. Okay, so I'm going to go even wider. Turn the dynamic back on. Okay. Now let's hear the room. Okay, that's a little more tolerable now. Now let's bring the room up along the... I'm going to turn the drum group on. Bring the room mic up. Yeah, it feels great. It feels nice. Let's hear that with the other instruments. I've got another mic here. I don't want that mono. I don't want that mono mic in this song. So we're just gonna turn it off. Get it out of our screen. Okay, so now let's talk about I've got kind of everything sounding pretty good on the spot mics. Now let's talk about all the dressings that I can add with these extra strips here. What I can do is I'm going to bring up the drums in solo, and let's start dealing with parallel. And I've got a BF76 in here, and the reason is it has an explosive release. There are other options. Distressor is another one that comes to my mind that I really love in this instance. But for you that don't have a lot of fancy plugins in Pro Tools, y'all have this because it's free, which is really great. But it is explosive. Check it out on the snare drum. You'll hear it in action. Here's it by itself. Without the 1176. Now listen to how much more enhanced the sustain is. And it also has this really great effect of bringing up the ghost notes, which is something that when you gate, you remove some of them, but they're really critical. So by parallel compressing them after the fact, you bring up a little bit of them and add them back into the mix. Without. With. Just a little bit of extra sustain. And sometimes I add the tom-toms to them. Let's see if we need that. I don't think so, but one thing. Okay, so in the rooms, I don't know if I like the toms in the rooms a whole lot. I feel like I'm going to take the room mics down just a little bit more. I think yeah, I think that's better. Now, one thing that I can do in the template is I can add some compression. I usually, one of my first go-tos is the channel strip compressor from SSL because it's amazing on tom-toms. But I also have this Pi compressor here. Check it. Check the two toms without. Now with. And it just really makes the attack speak. And you'll see that the settings here, decay time 2, compression ratio limit. You just barely want to flicker at least I usually just want to flicker the needle. Let's hear that in the drum mix. It's a little too hot here. Now the attacks are a little more balanced. But our output is really getting up there. So now we'll trim that back just a little. Okay, now the next thing that I think I want to do for a song like this, I mean, the snare drum sounded really good now, but I feel like in modern music, a lot of times good is not good enough. So what I'm going to do is I have a blank sample track here, and we're going to check out we're going to audition a couple samples from my first thing that brings up is my own sample library with Drum Sample Shop. But let's just start hearing, how some of these fit with it. Remember, this is what we're trying to match and enhance. You don't want to go too radically different because of how much is bleeding into the overheads. That's cool to add some body. That's cool too. Let's hear this one with the phase flipped. That's too much high-end ring. Okay. All right, let's try this CC Maple. Nice. I like that, but boy, I feel like this one. Let's hear that in the mix. All right, I like that. Let's just go ahead and commit to it. We're gonna let this render, bring it into the sample track, and we're gonna double check, because I have kind of found sometimes when I set it to what is right in trigger, when I get it back into the session, it looks wrong. But that looks good to go. Yeah, see that? We're pretty tight. We're pretty solid. So now let's just get this trigger track out of our way. It's not taking up any of your real estate. And let's bring the sample up to taste. Let's add just a tiny bit of attack to the sample. Now, again, this is from my own sample library, and it already has quite a bit of parallel treatment and stuff built into it. Okay, great. Now let's check out our settings over here and see if we're in a comfortable spot on our subgroup. Yeah, I may add that air back in. Okay, what I want to do now, and I wouldn't do it on this song. This song doesn't need it, but again, you know, trying to help you guys build your own template, and that is the distortion track. So you'll see that on my parallel compression and parallel distortion, they are fed by aux sends, because on this song, the only thing I'm using parallel compression on is the close mic snare drum. But now, what if we wanted to add a little bit of distortion? Okay, so let's pick the kick sample. And let's come up here to the aux send, and what I'll do is I'm going to mute the plugins so you can hear kind of the balance that's going to it, and I'm going to mute the unaffected and the parallel compression, so you're only hearing what we're feeding into the distortion channel. Okay, a little of that kick. We're going to add some of the clean snare, and maybe a little of the parallel snare, or the snare sample. About right there. We're definitely going to add some of the toms, but we don't want to get carried away because they can get really flabby. Let's see right here. And we may want just a touch. Let's try just a little bit of the overhead. Okay, now, so you'll see I've got a couple things here. Decapitator is the one that comes up by default. And oh yeah, and it gets much, much louder. So let's turn this down a little bit. Okay, you can hear the tom-toms were too hot in that blend. So let's turn those down. Go. Now, I do follow that with an EQ that I can put in, because a lot of times there's some low buildup. Just it's the sound of what Decapitator does. Right there. Let's duck that back a little. Okay, now let's bring that up along with our other drums. Hear that kind of that white noise, rough around the edges kind of thing that comes up with it. Okay, now let's hear that in the mix with this song. I don't hate just a touch of that in there at all, to be real honest. Now, what we'll do next is I'm going to add just a little bit of reverb, and you'll see I've already got 3 drum sends and 3 reverb returns. Now, I did a detailed walkthrough on my drum reverbs on Produce Like a Pro channel just recently. So if you're really interested in deep diving on that, watch that video because I go through every possible setting. But you'll see my first go-to here, is just some kind of a wood room kind of sound. So let's send the snare drum to a little bit of that. I don't hate that at all. Let's bypass it though and hear a small, brighter. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Make it active, but unbypass it. There we go. Nah, for this song, I'm gonna start. I just kind of know based on the tempo of the song and the genre of the song. I kind of have this. I know the plugins that I'm using, and I just kind of have a feel for which ones I want to try. Now let's add some of that to the tom-toms. Add some of that room. And I can tell you that I'm wanting to take a lot of low end out of the room. I'm going to use too much of the rooms for a second. Okay, now the last thing that I'm going to do before I start really getting to the headspace of mixing the rest of the song and thinking about everything is I'm going to set this a ceiling on the drums. Fantastic. I love it. It's great. So I kind of have all those tools there ready to go. It sounds to me kind of big, whether that's well, it's a combination of things. It's the X saturator from SSL for sure. The fact that we're using a couple Neve transformers here and there on some things like tom-toms and snare drum. The samples are helping. There's a lot of elements that go into getting this finished sound. But I kind of wanted to walk you through step by step each drum, as well as the group as a whole, and kind of let you see how I do it. Now, if this was a heavy rock song, we'd be more aggressive with compression, or maybe the choices of our snare samples, the amount of parallel compression and distortion would probably change. And then again, there's some Americana kind of things that come through, indie kind of things where everything's supposed to be dark and warm and round. And it's a whole different approach. But this is kind of a middle of the road song that I think fits a lot of what you guys would do, as well as the quality of the recorded drums. It was solid, but it wasn't amazing. It's not like we had, the best of everything in a massive room, and it is more of an average starting spot. And in something like that is when the samples can really help. So that said, man, I hope you guys picked up a trick or two, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I know I sure did. Thanks for watching, and happy mixing.